Hey, this is John Bush. I'm going to do just a quick little talk about some work I'm working on to allow properties to be runtime configured in Sakai. So if you want more information, go to either Jira, the KNL 739 ticket, and then that's got links to a more detailed proposal that I'm working on. The idea is that I've done another video that does a UI demo. You can find that linked off these pages. This I'm going to talk quickly technically about how I'm trying to do this. So problems we're trying to solve is allow configuration to be changed dynamically, do it for both the server configuration components as well as the spring injected property name bean type components. The idea is it's kind of an opt-in service. It's not going to be required, but it's going to allow people to opt in to say, hey, my property is configurable at runtime, and then kind of register that and allow it to work. It's also going to attempt to address the problem of documentation around properties, which is a problem right now. The config viewer has tried to solve that a little bit, but it's still cumbersome for people to figure out what properties are in the system, what they do, that sort of thing. So the basic design is that there'll be a DAO object, right? It's gonna store all the stuff in the database. So this is how you manage that. Eventually, the config viewer would sit on top of that, and actually have edit capability in there, so you could change things right through the UI. And then the meat of everything is either hidden behind the server configuration service underneath a property veil, or it's really tied up in the component manager underneath Spring's initialization for the stuff that is Spring injected. So the idea is that Sakai properties already kind of houses all this stuff, and then underneath that we're going to have a new Spring placeholder configurator that knows how to load runtime like reloadable properties. There's a thread that kind of is checking to update those, and then it's really hidden from the system. Other than that, optionally, services or whoever can implement this reconfiguration aware service or interface, which allows you to respond to either configuration changing, before or after configuration changes. So think of an example of where maybe you have a URL in your service class and it's configured with both a server address and a port, and you really need to kind of recreate that URL based on two different properties. This gives you an ability to do that. So inside the Sakai properties class, this is the guy who really initializes all the properties right now. There's already a couple different configurators. I'm gonna add a new one in here, and this guy basically is gonna understand a new syntax, and that's how we're gonna do the Spring injected ones. That in your component XML you'll put a new syntax, kind of like pound swiggle instead of $ swiggle, and that'll say that's a dynamic property. And then the configurator at startup time looks for all those and keeps a references to all the beans that use them. Then if anything changes, it can call back to all the references and call into that reconfiguration aware service to give people a chance to respond to the configuration reset, and then reset everything. Right? So that all happens kind of under the covers in real time. What I'm thinking is that this is going to give the ability for people eventually to kind of call into a service to register the documentation and say, hey, I'm dynamically configurable. But in the meantime, it would also give a chance for, say, even the config viewer or some initialization component to kind of suck in all of that existing data, because it's already in the configurator, right? It's like what versions of Sky, like what properties, what tools, what do they do. That data is already there for where it's been created. We could create an initialization thing that kind of reads through that, loads it all in the database, gets it all set up, and then eventually people can kind of morph to registering their own properties much in the same way that you register, tools register themselves or functions register themselves, right? So it's kind of along that idea. If you dig into this stuff, when I get it all kind of posted in a more displayable state, you'll see that this properties guy, this is the guy that's got the thread that's running, that there's listeners attached to all these properties